Well, hello. Welcome to the Creative Writing Life podcast, where we talk with writers from all mediums and genres about themselves, their work, and advice they have for writers. I'm your host, Paul Zeidman, and my guest today is Gigi Khonyongwa-Fernandez. And this is a little bit different. We're going to be talking about her book, From Roller Coasters to Carousels, and I have to read the subtitle, An Emotional Support Guide to Healing for NICU, Bereaved, and Special Needs Parents. Gigi, welcome to the Creative Writing Life podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it is my pleasure. I'm going to start this off right away before we get to our usual stuff. That
Yes,
usually we talk about writing in a creative aspect, hence the name of the
yes.
show. But this is more of a book in more of therapeutic kind of manner. I'm going to let you do the description, but we'll get to that in just a second. I just wanted to make sure everybody knows what to expect for today's show.
Like, where are we
Um,
going today?
Exactly, exactly. So,
Exactly.
as those familiar with the show are aware, what we'd like to start off things with talking about what have we read or watched lately, and I'll go first just to give Gigi a little time to collect her thoughts. I finished watching The Studio on Apple TV, and I absolutely loved it because I think it's a
Mm,
hilarious and probably more realistic than you expect look at behind the scenes of how Hollywood works. Um,
mm.
my wife and I went to see the new Wes Anderson film, The Phoenician Scheme. I did not like it at all. She
Nice.
really liked it. So,
That's
and
cool.
because this past weekend was the 50th anniversary of the release, I watched probably the last two-thirds of Jaws because it never gets old and it's still very, very wonderful to watch. And just even on the TV, it's still a great experience. That's what's been on my end. Gigi, what about you?
Oh, just a wide range you've been sort of exposing yourself to. So, um, I think just the last book that I've been reading is Empathy by Roman Krishna. I have to pronounce his name correctly. Roman. I think it's Chris Narek. Chris Narek is and I think that's just because of the place that I've been emotionally and mentally, but also the state of the world.
Mhm.
And really about how do we be more empathetic with the book is about how do we show up differently and be more empathetic with one another. And not just sort of in a woohoo woohoo sort of way, but in a real way, in a very tangible, sort of if you want to say measurable way. And so that's been very sort of eye-opening with how you can apply that concept in all sort of ways of thinking. And they talk about something around which really struck me. We know this concept about walking in other people's shoes, but it was really about walking, but actually listening. So you're
Mhm.
not just, okay, I'm gonna, live Paul's life, but really listening to his experiences, his perspectives, his, how things bounce off of him. So yeah, my sort of headspace that
Sure.
I've been in, and it's been really powerful, particularly if you was trying to apply it politically, religiously, culturally, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, that sounds fascinating.
Mm.
Gigi, let's talk a little bit about you and your background. And again, before we get to that, your book From Roller Coasters to Carousels. I'm going to read part of your bio because it's almost 2 pages long, and it's a relatively short podcast. Gigi Khonyongwa-Fernandez is a trauma-informed leadership coach, consultant, and advocate with a deeply personal connection to trauma and passion for resilience, healing, and finding joy. The mother of a surviving twin born 4 months prematurely and four angel babies, she integrates her lived experiences of trauma, healing, and hope into her work. And Gigi believes in and learns from the diverse beauty, flexibility, power, and dynamic nature of the human spirit and applies these lessons within her professional and personal life. Originally from the US, she now resides in London with her Spanish husband and British son, drawing inspiration from them as well as her travels to over 25 countries, and counting. From Roller Coasters to Carousel is her first book. So Gigi,
Great.
kind of give us what I like to call the elevator pitch. So if someone said, "Oh, yeah," you say I'm working on this book," and they say, "Oh, well, what is it about?" and you could say,
Moving from trauma to healing. That's really what it's about. And so although um I would say that's the key message.
hmm
But also, although it's a target, there is definitely a target audience because of my lived experience, um, and the people that I've connected with, both parents, but also professionals, and just in that space. it's really about how any of us, anybody who's experienced some degree of trauma, which truth be told is pretty much all of us, how we've experienced that, and how do you move from that? And I guess the that's a long elevator speech, isn't it?
No, it's a
The
long
other sort of
elevator ride. That's okay.
yeah, yeah. So the other sort of part of that lift speech would be the fact that we're looking at seven sort of most common, sort of the most main emotions.
Mhm.
And so it's really looking at that emotional trajectory, not in a linear fashion at all, because I always say, we don't experience trauma in a linear fashion, therefore we're not going to heal from it in a linear fashion. So the book is sort of, I encourage people, the reason I wrote it in a way to where the reader can have freedom to just jump to whatever emotion that they're either experiencing, dealing with, struggling with, or just simply curious about,
Mhm.
and sort of take it from there
So
and go through
okay,
that healing process.
that really sums it up nicely. I mean, so what was the inspiration for you to put all of this onto the page? I mean, you talked about in your bio that you and went through these traumatic experiences yourself, and also because you've worked with other people who have as well. Did you just decide, that so many people have gone through this, and maybe it's a reminder that they're not alone, or just that there are different ways to handle this or to try and deal with it?
Yes, that's a good query. I think there were a couple of reasons. One, yes, because of my lived experience, both personally and professionally. And it's a space that we don't often talk about. I mean, mental health, emotional health, increasingly we're speaking about it, but in some ways we're still leaving people in that space.
Mhm.
And so so I'm incredibly happy that we are much more open, much more vocal about the emotional aspect of us as humans, because but I think the next step would be, okay, what do we do about it? The so what do we do about it? So it was very important. This book has been sort of living the seed, I guess, if you like, was sort of in my head and heart for maybe 10, 15 years.
Mhm.
But it wasn't ready yet. And I didn't really know it wasn't ready yet. I was actually, to be honest, I was a little bit impatient thinking, oh, I need to write it down, I need to write it down, 10 years ago. But I'm really glad that I allowed that space to occur because I matured as a person, as a professional, as a parent, was able to connect with many people around the world. And you hear those voices in the book.
Mhm.
And so I think it came to fruition when it needed to be. So roughly around maybe a couple of years ago, was when I felt ready are we ever really ready to put
Yeah.
our thoughts on paper? Because there's a vulnerability to it, when you
Mhm.
think, oh wow, I'm putting this out and for others to read it and dissect it, etc. But I think about a couple of years ago, I sort of started well, maybe 2.5 years ago, started sort of the actual writing process. And
Okay. So I was going to ask you that some writers see writing in a creative way or even journaling as kind of a form of therapy to help deal with trauma. I mean, we've had writers on who they've taken to just sitting down and writing to really overcome some kind of trauma. They find it cathartic. Was that your experience working on this book? And I also wanted to ask that you have so many interviews with, as you said, with families and professionals. Did you find speaking with them and them just being able to talk about their experience? I mean, traumatic as they were, did they find it helpful in any way to help overcome or deal with what they had gone through?
definitely, definitely. Your Many of the people, so I interviewed over almost 50 parents and professionals from 14 countries, 6 continents. And the vast majority of them said me speaking to them was the first time someone asked them how they felt.
Hmm.
The first time someone, and these are people who've had their trauma experiences, sometimes 10 years post, or, the initial acute stage, I could say, because trauma is sometimes is ongoing, well, many times it's ongoing. So the fact that they were, but for the first time, felt heard,
Hmm.
and felt, oh wow, what I experienced actually was traumatic, because sometimes because you're not really allowed to, or you feel like you're not allowed to express that, that you sort of, kind of push it down. And you say, well,
Hmm.
maybe it wasn't that bad. Other people are worse, et cetera, et cetera. But being able to have that space was incredibly therapeutic for them. And also for me, because I think anytime we go through something that, and I call it, the reason I call it roller coaster is it is like a roller coaster. There's constantly movement up and down, jarring very hard, high, really, really highs and deep, deep lows. Is is when you're in that space, you're just surviving. You just I just need to make it through the next second,
Right.
sort of mentality. And I realized through the writing process when I actually, kind of got the courage enough with the support of my husband and family to actually start writing the book, I realized that there were things that I had sort of buried, and had not, I didn't realize that I was sort of wearing this mask. And so in that way, sort of writing it out was very therapeutic. And because I'm also a coach and I'm a trauma informed certified coach, bringing the I guess strategies to life in my own personal life, there were a few aha moments for me
Hmm.
as I know in writing the book, that I didn't anticipate, you know,
Oh.
and so I think that was surprising. And I think it was, I have to be honest, initially I was a little bit afraid to to be as vulnerable as I am in the book,
Hmm.
because I initially went to the writing process thinking, okay, okay, I've been through it, so let me just say you do X, Y, and Z, and that's it. So,
Hmm.
and I didn't say it in that sort of dry, but I sort of thought, let me leave my emotions out there. Let me just give the reader, tools or strategies, thought processes, etc. But then I thought, hang on a minute, that would bore me out of my mind if I read a book like that.
Hmm.
And that's not life, and that's not real. And the very fact that I went through it and I'm still going through it. It was very important for me to um, write it in such a way to where the reader felt like we were walking this journey together.
Hmm.
And that really helps with sort of that not feeling alone, but also these are some things that were very in every section. I don't call them chapters because I always say, trauma doesn't occur in chapters. So in every section, there's a pattern. So people are more reflective, more exploratory, and then action. So that's kind of like a sort of a little arc of coaching, if you like.
Hmm.
But it's still very much inviting the reader in a way to where they can choose to do that. They can choose to consider that. And so that was very important for me, because there's so much vulnerability within in that space of just acknowledging that, my goodness, this has happened.
Hmm.
And I haven't even talked about it for 5 years, but it's happened.
Right. Right.
And so yeah, so it was incredibly powerful in that way for both me as a writer, but also the people that I interviewed and what I've been getting back from my readers. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I was going to say that one of the strongest recurring feelings from reading all of these really heartbreaking stories is just severe empathy. And there's a passage in the book that's
It's my
I'm
book.
I'm paraphrasing something like, even if you don't know what to say, it's better to say you don't have anything to say rather than to say nothing. And I think it really comes down to that reading all these things that you want to help, but there's that whole hesitant, I don't know, am I intruding? This is a really personal time? What can I do? I mean, I just don't want to feel like I'm bothering them. I mean, it's what can someone on the outside do to help someone who may have gone through this?
Yeah. Um, that's a very, very important, I think, part of healing from trauma is acknowledgement. Just acknowledging that something occurred. And you don't have no one, no one's expecting you to have an answer. You don't need to have an
Mm.
answer. But it actually hurts more when it's like it's like the switch has been turned off and nothing has happened. And people go about their daily life
Mm.
just acting like nothing ever occurred when you're suffering inside. And the
I,
thing
I was
about
going I was going to ask, is it kind of like the elephant in the room that,
the
there
elephant in
there's
the
this
room.
big there's this big issue right there, but you're not sure how to address it.
Yes, yes. And it's okay to say exactly what you just said, Paul. I don't really know what to say. I
Mm.
don't even know I just know this happened to you. I'm really sorry. And just that acknowledgement. So many of the voices that you hear in the book often talk about that is, just how the relationships broke down with family and with friends, etc., because there was just zero acknowledgement of what happened. And I do understand that people are fearful because you're thinking, so many reasons why people don't do that. But if you can take away and saying, let me just say what you just said, I don't know what to say. I haven't experienced that, but know that I'm here. I'm here
Okay.
for you. And that is so incredibly powerful. And some people tend to just don't really say things, but they know you haven't eaten because you've been in the hospital, or you've been,
Sure.
you've buried your child, or you've whatever, and they will go in, and just provide food for you. That was one mother actually told me. I don't think I was able to. There was so much, content. It was hard to sort of pick out what to include in the book. But I remember a few parents saying just people coming over and just providing food for them
Hmm.
during their laundry, during the washing up. It was such an act of love and such an act of friendship, just by them being there. So that's incredibly important. I think it's okay to even say, I'm not sure what to say. And that is you acknowledging the pain or the trauma that that person is experiencing.
Yeah, that's like sometimes when meet a friend who's going through some rough times, I'll
Mhm.
say I feel really bad. Is there anything I can do to help? And they might not say anything. And so maybe you
Mhm.
have to take the initiative and just kind of take a step back and figure out, okay, what is it that they can use, or what could they need right now? As you
Mhm.
said, I could order you a pizza. I could take the
Mhm.
dog out. I could watch your other kids, or whatever.
Yes.
Something to help make it a little easier for them.
Yes, because with trauma, when you're experiencing, especially that acute phase, but even after the acute phase, um, it's so catastrophic in some ways, you can't really process it,
Hmm.
So you may, that friend you're talking, they may not be able to articulate, okay, I need X, Y, and Z, I need this.
Sure.
But it's something about, and sometimes it's not even, sometimes it's about the action. Okay, I'm going to go and physically do something. But you know what? A big part of it is just sitting there with them.
Hmm.
I think one of the parents I interviewed talked about sitting in the yuck, and that's that tribe, the people that, just holding their hand, being there with them. And we sometimes feel uncomfortable with the silence, but I always say that there's power in the pause. Silence can be incredibly therapeutic because you're allowing that person to just be with their thoughts. And you're allowing them to be with their thoughts, and not be alone because you're there. And I think as humans, oftentimes we feel like, okay, it's 30 seconds, nobody said anything, so I have to fill in all this space. I gotta fill
That
in
uncomfortable
that
silence.
uncomfortable silence. But I always say, if there's power, we have to get to a point where we're comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that silence is actually gold. And I know these are kind of sounds like cliches, but it's really, really important. When you're just able to sit there with someone and just be there, that's incredibly important.
Hmm. An underlying feature of the book that I found very relatable, and it's the idea that you're not alone. I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, that other families have experienced something similar, because a lot of times when something like this happens, you just feel like that there's nothing, no one else can understand what you're going through, or it's very isolating. Does that
Exactly.
help, or does that help or have any positive impact on the families that you've spoken with, just to remind them that I feel terrible about what happened to you, but you're not alone. Other people have gone through this, and you can be just as strong as they can.
Definitely. And I think, well, I don't want to say maybe just as strong. Maybe it's something about, um, you will go through this process, the healing process, moving from trauma healing in your own space, in your own time, in your own way. No one's experience of it is the same. We can experience very similar events, but how we process it will be completely different depending on our lived experience, depending on our history, depending on our family structure, our culture, whatever. All those things may be slightly different. But the fact that you know that you're going through it, there's a, I guess, permission, for lack of better words, permission that you
Mm,
kind of give yourself to allow yourself to go through that space. But all the people that I spoke with, and even the professionals I spoke with, talked about, because oftentimes they're alone as well. They can't express the sadness that they're feeling because
hmm
they have to be professional, whatever that means. But interestingly, the more compassionate you are as a provider, then you actually are better in the service that you're providing. You think about any interaction you have with anyone, maybe if you're buying something from someone, if you're, if you're going, if you're a teacher at your child's school, but when someone meets you with compassion first and wisdom second, you latch onto those people. We remember them
mm,
because they haven't been less professional, but they have been compassionate and empathetic, during the interaction with you. So yes, the whole concept of not feeling alone was incredibly important because, when you talked about, asked me earlier about sort of the sort of ethos of this book, sort
hmm
of the genesis of why did I sort of write this book, is I did see, not only in my sort of experience, but sort of my lived experience of being in the hospital and having loss, etc. But also I have board appointments both in the Europe and in the US, within the maternal health space. And there are just so many, I can't even count the number of times when just people had not been able to process what they had gone through.
mm.
They had not felt that they were able to, that they had not felt that they were allowed to. And I just thought, wow, we have to begin. I mean, I'm not saying my book is like, the catch, the be
Right.
all, but it is about, hopefully, a space to sort of begin to flip that switch and change the narrative and change the trajectory and be able to say, actually, no, it's okay. It's okay that you feel this way. It's okay that you feel anger. It's okay, 10 years post or 30 years post. It's
hmm
okay that you feel anxious and beginning to understand how those emotions, if they haven't been processed, they spill out in various ways, but being able to recognize them now and know what they are and also be able to know what you can do with them, was like hugely inspiring, but also empowering.
Well, I just want to remind everybody we're talking to Gigi Khonyongwa-Fernandez and her book From Roller Coasters to Carousels. I thought it was particularly effective to examine, you mentioned this earlier, to the different emotions that can be experienced and the anger, anxiety, fear, grief, guilt, overwhelmed or stress, and shock and disbelief. Now, I'm not going to ask if one of those is most prevalent, but it certainly seems like a lot of families and I guess professionals as well experience several, if not almost all of them at once. I mean, and there's really it's hard to address that. I mean, because someone
Mm,
goes through something and what they're going through could be completely different, or it's the same but on a much different level or different
level,
intensity
yeah.
from other with somebody else. I mean, that I think what's really great is that you address the issue, but you're not saying, and here's how you get over it. It's just kind of this is what you're going through, and these are the things that you're going to have to accept about it.
Yes, and these are the things, sort of even recognizing what the emotion is.
Mm,
There were people that I spoke with that said, I didn't even think about trauma. I didn't even realize I was being anxious. I didn't realize I was, having to suppress anger, et cetera, et cetera. So just even recognizing that the emotions and the reason, I mean, there are multiple emotions that we go through when sort of life, trips us up,
hmm
for lack of better words, when we experience trauma. But those were those seven that are sort of that I write about or highlight were the ones that happen time and time and time again. No matter which situation, no matter which country you're talking about, no matter which, they were always came up in some form or fashion. And so those were the ones that, and even, during my interview process, asking people what are the emotions that sort of three most dominant ones, et cetera, that they experienced during the event, but also now. And those were the same ones. So, that was like a pulse check, I guess,
mm,
to show that those emotions are universal. And I do say that in the book, they're universal no matter where you are. and they come up in that way. And it was important for me with in identifying those emotions, like you said, is not to just say do X, Y, and Z and you're done, but really invite you as a reader to come in and just begin to think about it for your own life. What does it
Hmm.
mean to you? What does anxiety mean to you? I mean, although I define it, how is it showing up for you? And sort of those, I kind of think about it, as we're talking about this now, it's really about encouraging you and championing you and sort of supporting you to peel back those layers little by little by little. And if you peel it back and it's too painful, you need to tape that tape that little piece up again.
Right.
That's fine. That's perfectly fine. Um, but it's just that process of, which is a lifetime process in many ways, of being able to um, understand what's happening. And that's why I talk about, sometimes your body doing what it's supposed to do in those situations, understanding what's happening, and then being able to have something else that you can use to be able to heal from it and control it or manage it in a better way, a healthier way.
Right. That's what I was thinking, that it's not really about, it's more about recognizing what the emotion that you might be feeling right now, or as we said,
Yes.
several at once, and not really, here's how you deal with it. It's more recognizing it, and here's how you can accept that that's what's happening. And it's really up to you about how you're able to manage dealing with it.
Yes, because you own, it's your story.
Hmm.
It's your experience, it's your, everything. And you own it. So it's really about helping you to uncover how you want to own it, how you want to take that next step. If you want to take that next step, if you're not ready, maybe you're not ready to deal, to take the next step with anxiety, but maybe you are with stress, maybe you are with, with grief. And so there's no, throughout the book, there's no judgment call there.
Mm.
There's no, I don't make a judgment on you as a reader, and you don't, and I really encourage you as you're going through that book, for you not to do your own self-judgment. It's really, like you said, about highlighting what is happening, highlighting what, how that could manifest itself within your life, and then looking at some potential strategies that can help you move forward. That's why, if you mentioned journaling earlier,
Hmm.
what I do encourage in the action part of every section is for people. I was going to start you off with journaling, but then encourage you to continue journaling, because oftentimes when we put things out on paper, like you said earlier, it is very therapeutic, but also it may help you to kind of really, when it's written, it looks, you realize, oh, it's not saying it's not as bad as it is bad, but then you begin to see some of the ways in which you can start mitigating or chipping away at it little by little. It's not as big, that gigantic elephant. And I think I talk about it in the book. You don't eat the whole elephant at one piece. You do little by little by little by little. And it may sound, oh, this is going to take me forever. But you didn't, you have to do it in a way to where it's manageable, it's controllable, it's doable, and it's not overwhelming. You don't want the healing to be overwhelming, just like your trauma is.
Hmm. Right. Actually,
Mm,
that kind of leads to what I thought was probably the most encouraging section of the book, and that's the
mm.
last section, which is simply
The
called
hope.
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 And
Yes.
it's only 4 pages long,
Yes.
which I thought, and which also it also reinforces the carousel aspect of the book, but also not. And right after that, you have, I think, 3 appendices of words of advice and
Yes.
resources.
Yes.
And I just thought that was a great way to end, because someone reading this book most likely has gone through this really traumatic experience, but it ends
Yes.
with this, not necessarily it's going to be okay, but it's kind of like, that there is a light, at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, and here are some things that could help you get there, but also here are words of hope and encouragement from other people, people who have gone through this, people who have helped other people go through it. And I just am very curious to know that, was it hard for you to not want to include that? Because I feel like you have to, because you don't want to end the book on this, really, on a real
Oh,
down note.
yeah, yeah. And I don't, and um, yes, it was very important. I didn't even, that was a no-brainer. I was definitely going to end on that high note. But I also wanted to, throughout each section, to, even though we're talking about some very difficult sort of emotions, I didn't want the sections to feel downer either. I wanted it to be real, that this is what happens, this is what you
Hmm.
experience. But then there are ways of, it's almost like the sections are almost like, I think if you think about I don't know, a black sheet of paper or something, and we're just kind of poking holes through it so that light can begin to sort of seep through.
Hmm.
And by the end of the book, going back to your comment earlier about not feeling alone, I didn't want you to feel alone. Feel like, okay, we've gotten here, what do I do next?
Hmm.
So that's why it was important to end on hope, but it was also important to continue to hold the reader's hand and giving them options and choices and resources that they could tap into, but also that they can connect with their tribe. So when I interviewed all of the parents and professionals, I asked them, I said, is there any words of wisdom that you would have to someone else who's going through this, who have gone through this? And those are their words. And I think how, that's so powerful, to have your tribe in writing, sort of, and that
Hmm.
that their words are from the heart, their words are from a lived experience, and their words are really full of wisdom and compassion. And so yes, it was not even, I mean, that is, and you mentioned about carousel too. It's important. It was important. It is important for me when I was writing the book is, and even now, is the healing process is not a static process. Neither is the roller coaster process. It's not static in any form or fashion. It's very dynamic. It's continuing to grow. To what is the word? I'm getting tongue twisted.
Tongue-tied,
Um,
yes.
it is tongue twined. Yes, a very new word. You're still continuously moving.
Hmm.
But you're just not moving, or just the hope is that you're not moving in such a jarring, sort of not knowing what's around the corner fashion. And so the hope part and the wisdom, words of wisdom and the carousels, I'm sorry, and the resources are as a part of that carousel. So you're part of that continuously moving forward, and I encourage people to even come back to the book because even you read it first, and I've had people that have read it so far that said, I'm actually going to go back to it
Hmm.
because I was going through it and I realized something else came out and I'm going back for me. And so you're, I hope that when people read it, that it gives them this sense of community. It gives them this sense of I'm not alone. It gives them the sense of this actually did happen. I can acknowledge it. But it also gives you a hand to hold throughout your continued healing process because it is a journey. And I'll talk about it. It's a continuous journey.
Hmm.
And it's nothing to be, sort of embarrassed about or ashamed about. I think about, if you have a physical ailment, you have a physical ailment. If you
Right.
break your leg, you don't pretend that your leg isn't broken. You don't say, "Oh, I'm not gonna use my crutches because I'm going to just go and try to walk." It's like, so why do we do it? Why do we expect people to do it when we're talking about the emotional injury, the
Hmm.
emotional pain? So that's why it was yes, incredibly important. That was probably one of the, even before I wrote it, I knew that I was going to end in some sort of way. I didn't know how it was going to kind of, pan out, but I knew I was going to, wanted to end in some sort of way like that.
Okay. I have to ask, so the book is From Roller Coasters to Carousels. So what has the reaction been? I mean, I'm assuming you've probably heard from so many more people who have also gone
Yeah,
through this, or maybe somebody in their family.
very positive. And
Mm,
two things have happened with the reaction thus far. It's only been out a little over a couple of weeks. Um, is It's been incredibly positive with, like I said earlier, people saying, wow, we've never even talked about our emotions. We just kind
mm,
of we just, either didn't even talk about it, did acknowledge it, or we just thought, okay, maybe we're the only ones, sort of thing. So very positive to people who've experienced it, but was it been incredibly, well, I kind of figured it would happen, but I didn't realize to the degree. many people who haven't experienced that particular kind of trauma, but it because I'm focusing on the emotions, it's resonating with them with other things that they've experienced. So
Mm,
they've had experiences that have not been the same, but the emotions and to the experience is the same. So the
mhm,
emotional journey is the same. So it's not, a NICU or bereaved or special needs experience. It's another experience that causes the same emotions of anxiety, of anger, of stress, of guilt, of grief. And so it's the sort of response of seeing those two, I guess, audiences, for lack of better words, but how they both are connecting along this emotional journey, and this emotional journey of healing, and how it's resonating. The message of moving from trauma to healing is resonating them regardless of what that experience has been. That's been that's been really amazing to sort of to hear.
okay, that's great. And so again, the book is From Roller Coasters to Carousels, and we've been talking with Gigi Khonyongwa-Fernandez. Gigi, this has been a fascinating discussion. And where can people find out more about you, and also if they wanted to get their own copy of the book?
Yes. Well, before we start, can I ask you a query?
Sure.
Just how did it resonate with you?
It's different because I'm an adoptive father. So
Mm,
our daughter was about 10 months old when we got her. Uh, and it was just different. I can't say I felt like an outsider while reading it because I did not go through the experience of having to go to the hospital, with my wife in labor or anything. Uh, so, and I do know we have some friends who have had this kind of tragic loss in their lives, and so we've really just it is that feeling of almost helplessness that you
yeah.
want to help, you're not sure what to do. So that's what it
Yeah.
took a while for me to kind of develop that. Okay, it's not about me. I'm here to help them. I'm here for
Yeah.
support. So
Hmm.
so to go to them and say, what can we do to help? And sometimes it was
Hmm.
just be like you said, just bringing them some meals, or can we take the dog out for you? And they'd be like, oh, that'd be so great, thank you. We
Hmm.
kind of
Hmm.
left it up to them. That it was not our place
Yes.
to
Yes.
intrude. It was more
Yes.
just like, we are here to support you. If you want to talk, that's great. If not, that is totally your prerogative. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
how I approached reading. That's what I was feeling while I was reading the book.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I think that, and that's the beauty of it is, depending on where you are, it could either be from how can I help someone else that's experienced this, how can I look at my own life, and look at sort of emotions are resonating with me in my own life, or something else. So it was always interesting to get just to get that feedback. So I really appreciate that.
Of course, of course.
So your query was, where can people find it?
Where can people find the book From Roller Coasters to Carousels, and also if they want to find out more about you, and also the coaching that you mentioned as well?
Yes. So the book's available in Amazon and Barnes and Nobles, online, and Waterstones here in the UK. So you can do it online, but also you can go into your local bookstore and request it. My website, you can find out more about me at familiesblossoming.com. And what was the third query? It was
And
around.
also maybe like if social media, if somebody wants to follow you there, or
Oh yes, oh yes, and so and you can also find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to message me on LinkedIn, or which is my name, Gigi Fernandez, or as well as Instagram, where my handle is Your Joy Finder.
and also I believe that you have a page on Facebook as well.
Oh, I didn't say that. Oh yes, I
I
do. Under Geek, Families Blossoming, or you can also just do sort of my personal one as well. But Families Blossoming is my page on Facebook.
Okay, familiesblossoming.com for all things geeky, and From Roller Coasters to
Yes.
Carousels. Once again, the book it's a very intense read. I will say that, especially reading about all
Yeah,
the
it's not an easy
experiences.
read,
It is not an
but
easy
hopefully
read,
it's
but
an
it's a very powerful read as well.
yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
well,
Thank you so much.
Of course, Gigi Khonyongwa-Fernandez, excuse me. Thanks for being here today. Viewers and listeners, if you enjoyed today's show, please hit like. Feel free to leave a comment and subscribe. For my social media, you can check out my screenwriting blog. That's maximumz.blog. Still on Twitter at maximum_Z. For the show, it's on Twitter at podcastcwl. It's also on Blue Sky at podcastcwl. I'm on Blue Sky and Instagram. Both are at Pez Screenwriting. You can check out my Go Ahead and Ask books on Amazon, and just about to shoot my first short film. So if you want to contribute to the post-production costs, I'm not going to say no. Just reach out all of those social medias and say, hey, I'd like to chip in a couple of bucks. Like I said, that's Gigi. I'm Paul. This has been the Creative Writing Life podcast. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and most importantly, go write something.